Meta shakeup? Let's look at the 10.1.7 DPS in Mythic Plus and rank them in an awesome tier list as always, because that's what we do. Even though there's this overwhelming, over-predominant mentality in the community that this is the worst class balance that has ever been, I will show you why you are wrong and how wrong you are. Let's go. And we're gonna start it off with Affliction real quick. Now, Affliction has seen a slight shakeup. Right now, currently, we're gonna put Affliction into B tier. It's actually good, and you can probably see the amount of keys it's doing now. We're going to be looking at all of the specs, especially the ones into D tier all the way to the bottom, and you'll see that everybody does pretty high keys. Affliction is also doing pretty cool. I think it hasn't reached all the way to 29s, maybe not even 28s yet. It depends on when you see this video, because obviously we're recording it a little bit ahead of time. But Affliction is doing pretty good. It has a good damage profile. It's actually fully geared right now. It's doing a lot better than a lot of other specs. So B tier is actually really good when we're analyzing the kind of end of Season 2 with 10.2 on the horizon. Enough about Affliction though. Last week on stream, we were doing the raid, and every time there is one person trolling the Forgotten Experiments boss by putting the bleed on everyone, and every time I'm focused on the mechanics and can never tell who is being an intentional jerk. Oh, half the raid has the bleeds, of course. But I actually recorded the run unbeknownst to that person. Let's see. There he is. Gotcha. And with the magic of Outplayed, I can edit just this clip and save it and then share it on our Discord. I got you, man. No more bamboozling. Never let trolls mess with your game. Record your runs with Outplayed, and with its cool editing and clipping features, you can snap the troll and publicly shame them, or you know, use it constructively to analyze your own gameplay and improve as a player. But most importantly, the troll thing. Outplayed is mega easy to get and use, plus it's free. Click the link down below and you will have it installed in just a few minutes. Thanks Outplayed for sponsoring this video. Frost DK is also in a strange situation where it kind of hasn't really changed much in the position of the tier list compared to last time. I think last time we had it also around middle of the pack, which is B tier. However, the kind of keys that it's clearing and the score that people have reached with Frost DK is pretty high when it comes to looking at the DK DPS specs, because we're always seeing these Unholies crank those numbers because of all of those augmentations and power infusions, but Frost DK is not too shabby, I'm telling you right now. Unholy, however, is a little bit more shabby. Unholy is gonna go all the way down to C tier, and it seems to consistently underperform when it comes to Mythic Plus. I mean, sure, it's doing pretty high keys, it's above 25s, it's no biggie. People are doing really good damage. It just so happens to be that the toolkit doesn't really favor Unholy. Obviously, when you go into the dungeons, you're probably going to be playing Bursting Swords if you're playing, you know, the common build for Unholy DK, and that kind of requires a couple of globals to set it up and do it properly, while other specs like Balanced Druid, Fire Mage, and all of those specs can just like blast off the bat, and Unholy still has about 10, 12 globals before it can actually start blasting, which is not what you want when you're pushing high keys. Probably the main reason why Unholy is so down, because damage is fine. I don't know how much it scales, because we're not seeing Unholy's push as high as the other specs, but the damage is good. Listen, if you're up average, you're gonna be blasting meters if you know what you're doing on Unholy as well. Similarly on Havoc, man, Havocs cannot catch a break. Kind of middle of the pack, which is weird because we're always seeing Havoc in usual seasons pretty high, at the very least A tier, but in Dragonflight, the design just doesn't favor Havoc, man. And we already know that Demon Hunters are getting a big rework in 10.2, not yet implemented on the PTR to know how they're gonna fare in the future. However, right now, even with all the flag that Havoc is getting, it's still middle of the pack, and middle of the pack means bigger keys than you and your mom have ever done. Your mom's ace. Let's go! Balanced Druid. Balanced Druid is consistently king, A tier. Not S tier, because there's a reason why Balance is not S tier, as well as the other 20-something specs. But Balance is still pretty good, has really good AoE, the kit is really nice. It doesn't seem to be propped up by a lot of externals, although obviously the top Balance Druids that are pushing keys are probably gonna run an Augmentation and a Shadow Priest every now and again for extra oomph. But as we know from the core design of Balanced Druid, they're very solid. They're normally S tier as opposed to this cranky season that we're playing right now. So think about it that way. Think about it that way. I think balanced druids have started doing 30s. I know we have some data on the screen right now. It's a lot of data right now. I get lost in the numbers sometimes. But that out of the way, the other side of the druid coin is feral. And feral is not too shabby. I know that feral has been consistently middle of the pack or slightly below middle of the pack throughout dragonflight. However, now it's still middle of the pack, but middle of the pack this time means once again clearing 25s, 26s, possibly even 27s and 28s with B tier overall. It's kind of bottom of the B tier, and we're going to see how B tier will evolve throughout this video, but it's still pretty solid. It obviously competes very hardly with balance. It obviously has lost some of the AoE oomph that it had last season, where it was just like blasting millions of AoE DPS. Probably because of the scaling, probably because the tier set is just wank. Oh my god, this tier set this time around is just blech. I'm playing with it, I do not enjoy whatsoever, and not only that, it just seems to be a little bit poop. Devastation is once again in C tier, really low, which is crazy because I know Warcraft Logs kind of has Devastation pretty down in the overall rankings, but if you look at stuff like sub-creation, you might see Devastation a little bit higher, depending on the affixes as well. Because, listen, man, we're not gonna sit here and pretend that augmentation is not a thing. And augmentation is just destroying the entire game. And who's going to play Devastation when augmentation is pretty much the same spec and it just does crank damage? So that's probably the issue with Devastation. It's still most likely a squishy spec. They didn't get a lot of buffs in it and the toughness, but that usually becomes an issue into later keys, while augmentation granted has a little bit more defensive power through its black attunement and its blistering scales, I believe it's called, that gives you a bunch more armor. So it's slightly worse, but the damage still doesn't seem to rival because the damage is still slightly low. But overall, if it wasn't for augmentation, we could probably see Devastation a little bit into B tier. Beast Mastery Hunter, this is interesting because Beast Mastery has been consistently very lackluster in terms of AoE. Its single target has always been pretty good, but it's very close to A tier. It's currently leading the pack into B tier, and I was really debating whether or not I should put this into A, but A tier specs usually just roll above 2700 IO score, which is part of how we're going to be ranking all of these specs. There's a lot of metrics going around because I know people go in comments, but you've put my spec into C tier and I'm topping the meters. Well, listen, man, realistically, if you're watching this video now and not just skipping with the timestamps, because I know you, I see you right there, I see you're skipping with the timestamps. Pretty much in terms of like overall performance in the grand scheme of things, there's no spec below B tier. But putting everything into B, A, and S tier is a little bit boring because there's kind of a difference between some of these specs, so we kind of have to spread them out a little bit. And BM is currently leading the middle of the pack, very close to being a top tier spec, which is what A and higher would be. And that is definitely not marksmanship, because marksmanship is poopalicious. Marksmanship is getting a lot of love in 10.2, especially with the tier set. We'll see how the numbers turn. However, marksmanship seems to be doing a lot better in raids than in dungeons, which, you know, it's a different damage profile. And although this is not a raid tier list, I am pointing out that it's not necessarily a bad spec. It's just that in AoE, it seems to have lost its edge, once again similar to Feral in Season 1, where marksmanship was just cranking AoE, but it seems to have taken even a bigger dip than Feral this season, which is a little bit of a shame because marksmanship is pretty fun. It's probably right now one of the most, no, it's definitely the most fun hunter spec. I said it, because survival is next, and I'm gonna shit on survival. I'm not. Survival is fine. Survival is still middle of the pack. It's actually doing worse than BM, and I think, don't quote me on this, but I believe, if not the last tier list, but the one before that, we have seen survival be better than BM, and it seems that BM overtook survival. Gear just favors Beastmaster more, and there's no big boss endgame bow this time around for people to blame it on. Survival is just fine. It's fine. It has a lot of good utility. To be fair, if I would have to play a Hunter Mythic Plus, I would probably play survival because its utility kit is slightly better and easier to use, but once again, I digress. Hunter is Hunter. It's overall good. BC tier, the class is fine. You're gonna have fun. You're probably not gonna push 31s or 32s or even 30s, who knows. Arcane Mage. Now, pretty close to Beast Smash in terms of performance, but it's doing a little bit better, and that's why I'm putting it into A tier, since it's actually doing pretty good. Historically, the mage specs, and we're gonna get into the next two as well, they have been all over the place in terms of the overall rankings in Mythic Plus, but not this time around, because we're gonna get to Fire as well. Fire is a god tier spec. This is no surprise. Even with the nerfs to the god comp, Fire is still there, and spoiler alert, the other two are there as well. But Fire is obviously pretty good. It's one of those specs similar to Unholy, where it's getting a lot of beef, a lot of juice, a lot of crank from externals like Power Infusion and Augmentations, which we're gonna get to in a second. And to be fair, probably more than I like to admit. It's never really fun when your spec is propped up by external power systems, other players, or other gear, because, you know, when they're gone, you're gonna get poop. And if Fire Mage is nerfed now, imagine Fire Mage without those two other factors. It's gonna suck. Frost Mage, however, seems to be the most solid mage spec that I would be comfortable of recommending to people. It's in A tier. Although it's close to Arcane, you'll see that there's quite a bunch of specs in between these two. Frost is actually really surprisingly good, which is crazy, because if you look at the Radar.io overall ranking of the top Frost Mages, they're actually pushing pretty high keys. Now, I don't know if they're, you know, Fire on the side and, you know, they're just being carried in these keys, because these days it's kind of hard to tell. But at the very least, they're clearing the keys, so props to them. But it's good, man. It's good, because it doesn't seem to be like, you know, over the top like Fire. Windwalker, once again, how the mighty have fallen. Not too far down. It's down into B tier. It's not better than Beast Mastery. Haha, you wish, Windwalkers. It's solid once again. It's AoE, it's pretty good. Usually B tier specs are probably where most specs should be, although it's, you know, probably better if they just do a little bit more damage. But Windwalker is what it is right now. It's gonna get a bunch of love once again with the new tier set. We're gonna see how the tuning will affect it into the next season. Right now, there's not much to say. It's pretty much more of the same. However, Ret kind of seems to like juggle between tiers when we ever rank it all the time. Right now it's in A tier, and we had it into A tier before, and we had it into B tier before, and it always kind of fell just slightly above mid. But now it's a lot more above mid. It's actually pushing way more, which is weird. I don't know why. Is everybody just running Crusader Strikes now? Because all I'm seeing on the Warcraft logs in terms of builds for Reds, that's Crusader Strikes left and right. And that's usually an indication that you're playing a much more haste-focused build. And haste usually scales way better into late game for a lot of the specs that prefer it. Those are not life specs like Windwalker, for instance, but that's maybe why Red is good. But you know, Red is always solid. It's, let's say, the melee version of Frost Mage. It's fairly simplistic. I would recommend it to people to play it. It does a lot of damage, and once again, although everybody loves Augmentation and Power Infusion, it does not rely on those to actually be good and give you the satisfaction of getting that damage into keys. Shadow Priest, going all the way into God comp. Dude, what do you want me to say? What do you want me to say, man? It's Shadow Priest. It has Power Infusion. Well, Holy Priest has Power Infusion. Yeah, but Holy Priest doesn't do Shadow Priest damage. But Discipline, well, same thing applies. Shadow Priest is just really good. It has, well, obviously it has a lot of damage on its own. And you can, you know, consider Power Infusion as part of its kit. So it's not like it's getting Power Infusion as well as giving it. It's just, it's there, right? And, you know, Priest just has godlike utility for overall Mythic Plus. Mass Dispel is pretty good. You have a lot of other dispels. You have Mind Control, which, dude, Mind Control, Incorporeal, have you played last week? Jesus, that's good. And if you're not gonna have a Holy Priest, then Discipline Priest, because you're probably gonna be running other healers, more on that on the healer tier list, you're gonna want a Shadow Priest. Now, on the opposite side of the spectrum, Assassination, dog shit, bottom of the barrel, yo. Well, not for long, because, you know, the rework is on its way, and dude, 10.2 Assassination is looking so juicy that it just makes me not want to talk about 10.1.7 Assassination at all, although this is a 10.1.7 video and I should talk about Assassination 10.1.7. Listen, man, even D tier spec, like, you can look at the top keys cleared by Assassination, although Zero Cool is just weird. Is this person from Mars? How is this one Assassination Rogue just cranking all of these high keys compared to everybody else? Needless to say, Assassination has the potential. It has to compete with Outlaw and Sub, which just do everything that Assassination does way better at a much more higher competitive level. So you know, if you love Assassination and just Assassination and you want to marry it, you can still marry it and do pretty high keys. And speaking of its brothers, Outlaw is still kind of mid. It's a little bit worse than Havoc at the moment. It's an interesting journey to look at Outlaw and how it kind of fell down from the beginning of Dragonflight to how it is now. It didn't actually receive nerfs, it's just that everybody's just like speeding past it. But even with all of that, even with Outlaw getting a mediocre power from gear, from the raid and the trinkets and all that stuff, it's still good, man. It's still, you know, B tier. And B tier, as we know, is doing decent keys, even on Outlaw. Subtlety, however, is just boss, man. It's boss. Big boss, melee king, still reigning the meters and the rankings as the best melee in the game, currently performing, spoiler alert for the other melees in the list. If you thought Arms Warrior is gonna be S tier, you fool! You have no idea what you're talking about. But Sub is obviously really good as part of the Rogue rework together with Outlaw. Sub is in an amazing state, and 10.2 is looking pretty juicy as well. So if you're looking at the tier list to kind of get an idea of where your spec is, or maybe a spec that you would like to play is, kind of getting a sense of like, does this have enough power? You should probably be, you know, pretty chill and laid back when you play Subtlety. You have no problems. Elemental is still decent, all the way into B tier, very close behind Beast Mastery, kind of a slight contender to be A tier, although I do think we had it in A tier in the past. Elemental is fine for the amount of difficulty that this spec provides. I would probably want to see it into S tier, my dude, but it just is what it is. It's a complex spec, it's really fun. The utility kit, although it's really good, it doesn't really seem to be that valuable, and unfortunately, Shaman utility kit hasn't really shined that much in Dragonflight altogether. You'd think that all of these poison cleansing totems, I think that was good in Algothar Academy last season, but right now, Afflicted, maybe that's the thing. I have no idea. Listen, Elemental is fine. It's top of the B tier. It's better than probably half of the other DPS picks in the game. You're gonna be fine playing Elemental. Similarly with Enhancements, actually Enhancement is a little bit way better. Dude, Enhancement and Red have been like brothers this entire time, the secret brothers of the Season 2 Dragonflight. It is doing really good. Obviously A tier is nutty. Together with Red and Sub, top melee specs have been consistently, I think Enhancement has been top on the ranking since Season 1, so it's still doing consistently pretty good. Maybe one of the better design specs, because running through 2 seasons and 2 tier sets and a bunch of nerfs, Enhancement is still very solid, very good spec. Demonology, however, is not. Demonology fell down, dude. My main is dog poop. Well, you know, not dog poop, it's C tier. It's down in the dumps, down in the gutter, way worse than Affliction. How about that, by the way? Considering how much hype Demonology has been getting at the beginning of this season. My, how the mighty have fallen once again. It's still good. It's okay, it's just not as efficient as the other 2 Warlock specs if you want to play a Warlock, and it's definitely one of the least efficient, if not, I believe, the worst casters in the game. Are you gonna consider Marksmanship a caster? Either way, Demonology is fine. Listen, if you love Demonology, you're gonna be fine. Single target still does decent amount of damage, even if you don't play Portal, so you're gonna be good, right? Hopefully we see more love for Demonology. The tier set in 10.2 is okay, but we'll see exactly how it all plays out. Destruction, however, is actually, I think, doing better now. I know we had it into A tier before, but that was always a little bit sketchy, a little bit like, man, maybe this is B tier. But now it's actually doing really well, and it has seen its ups and downs because of how its AoE is and how much of a competition balance has been. Obviously, Fire Mage and Shadow Priest, and usually other range specs as well, as not just these 3. Dishra is particularly really good. It obviously has a very big condition to its damage, things staying into Rain of Fire, which you would think is a simple thing to accomplish, but when you're playing with inexperienced people or people who are not used to simply playing with a destruction, the damage drops off a lot. So the learning curve or the performance curve has a very steep peak, edge, ledge, whatever you want to call it, so most people will not see value out of destruction in mid-high to low keys, not even in mid-high keys, not even mid keys. It's a lot. Arms Warrior has seen a big rise. Kind of, I always want to see it in front of Fury rather, but right now Arms Warrior is doing really good, all the way into A tier once again. and with no actual competition. It's really cool because Fury is very close, and we're gonna get to Fury as well. Arms just has crazy AoE burst. Now, I've been playing a little bit of Arms, and clearly I'm not playing 28s and 29s and things like that, and even 30s, but I do see that Arms has a slight issue with single target, which is maybe what's keeping it behind specs like Enhancement, Ret, and Sub, but its AoE is out of this world. The potential burst is crazy, not to mention that you have pretty good utility with Spell Reflect and a lot of dungeons, which is obviously brought by Fury as well, which is right there. Now, I don't know which ones are better. Fury seems to have slightly better overall performance. Overall, IO score is kind of similar. I would probably put Fury a little bit further in front just because it does have a little bit of single target. It doesn't have particular big issues in AoE, and considering that Tyrannical is usually the biggest obstacle to overcome when you're pushing high keys, Fury would probably have a little bit of an edge. And this steaming pile of Garbo trash, Augmentation S here. Listen, I'm not knocking on anybody that's loving Augmentation, and to be fair, I kind of like the fact that Augmentation has broken the game and upset a lot of people. We need these things in WoW to keep it fresh and interesting. Augmentation is obviously still really good. It's getting nerfs after nerfs, and it's still pretty good. And listen, you need to listen to me. I think Augmentation should be overpowered. It should break the game because it's the first ever support spec that we ever get. We should have more roles like this with supports and other things, kind of like a spin on the existing roles of all of the specs. And I think Augmentation does a really good job at putting a spotlight on what something new could do to the game, and it's definitely gonna be tuned down. But as it stands, it's still God-tiered comp with the exact same usual suspects pushing the 32s, I think they're doing right now, all of the S-tier specs. But that's just in this season because 10.2 is just around the corner and is bringing a lot of cool stuff. And if you don't know yet, we have this video out and a bunch more others on the 10.2 changes and all the goodies, tier sets, and a lot of other stuff that's coming that you should check to better prepare for the next season.